All right, boys and girls, we are back, and my dear friend, lovely and always talented Dracoya is back. Uh,
Back after a long hiatus.
yes, a long one video hiatus, but we are glad that she is back and raring to go. Now, in the last video, we talked about alignment and reasons why we believe that alignment can be a good thing. Like, there's arguments to be had on both sides.
Right.
But for the most part, the argument is that alignment is a bad thing because it lacks nuance. Not everybody is lawful good all the time, regardless of what they say on their character sheet. Not everybody's always this or that. Yeah, and that is tough because it is the function of a game, right? Um, it is a parameter of the game. And as a role-playing game, you're always gonna have those players who just do whatever they want, and they'll say, well, I'm chaotic neutral, so I can do whatever they want. That's
Yeah.
BS anyway. That's a whole nother video. But but
Maybe that's the
but
next
for
one.
yeah, but for people who actually want to role play, alignment can mean something. And always, the DM can kind of how they utilize alignment can make all the difference. If they give players uh the room to maneuver and have emotional moments where they're not necessarily acting themselves. Yeah, I mean, alignment is something that is still usable, but more flexible than what I think the game intended originally. Um, Now, we are going to take this conversation in a new direction, almost like a philosophical discussion of alignment, where we delve into nuance. And, by delving into nuance, we'll see why alignment breaks down. But at the same time, I think the arguments from the last video still hold up. Um,
We're
and
gonna
we're not going
explore
to
some
really
ways.
discuss much of law, chaos, and neutrality because that's really less interesting. But the discussion of good and evil is one that is, I think, very interesting and very provocative. Would you say, Dracoya?
Yeah, no,
Provocative.
and we're gonna be exploring more gray areas. So yeah, this is
Mhm.
this is fun.
Yeah. So, and you'll see where when you drill down where the nuance makes a difference and why certain alignments as they're written um break down under scrutiny. But again, if a DM just gives the players the room and the players wish to actually role play and they can use alignment as a guide rather than a rule, we can see that it can be a very useful tool.
Yeah.
Um, so from the standpoint of of the how alignment was written, it was certainly written from the perspective of modern Western civilization of fat gamers living in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin 50 years ago, right? Uh,
Right.
Now, from the and I think when they designed alignment and it really got into like advanced Dungeons and Dragons and 2E. um evil was more of like that comic book villain evil. Like they're just evil all the time and doing evil for evil's sake. Haha, they're twisting their mustaches and whatnot. Um,
Well,
but
we're going through this interesting revolution of like what is evil and what is good, where, even our movies and our regular media, we've got evil villains that maybe there's something a little bit different to them. Or then you've got shows about superheroes that are saving the planet, but actually they kill babies for fun.
yeah, and I think like there is that revolution. Like if you look at like board games, for example, even in like board games where evil isn't necessarily or alignment isn't necessarily a thing. but you have games like The Others where the villains are actually the heroes of the game because all the heroes have been defeated, and now the villains have to like protect Earth. You know,
Yeah.
like there's this anti-hero worship almost that goes on. But you know, so but when you drill down into it, if you know, the question is, to what degree does someone need to commit evil acts before they would be like rubber stamp deity evil? You know, like that rubber stamp sound that you hear. Chunk. I don't know what that sound would be,
Womp.
but um, you know, would a thief who's willing to steal candy from a baby and swindle a little old lady for her entire retirement, would they, but they refuse to like hurt people physically or commit murder, would they be evil? You know, would somebody who's a kind person, he would give people who are in hunger, you know, the food if they needed it. You know, they would be a very kindly person in, and I'm going to pitch this one to you, Jacoya. So,
Okay.
would somebody who is a very kind person, but who owns slaves and believes that slavery is just another function of society, you know, like that is their lot in life, you know, but they're otherwise kindly and they donate money and they do good deeds, are they evil? Like, and I'm asking from like a D&D standpoint, and I'm asking from like a real world standpoint, are they evil? And
So, so let me clarify. This person owns slaves, or this person
sure,
agrees
they
with the
do.
concept?
They own
Ah,
slaves, and culturally, in their culture, you know, it's a perfectly acceptable practice because, um, you know, it's always been, and this goes kind of back to one of our older videos where we talked about slavery and how, you know, it still exists today. There's still people all over the world who, you know,
there are.
46 million people in the world who are slaves. And you know, and in certain cultures, it's just like part of the deal, you know. Is that evil?
Well, and then there's the big
Does that,
question of,
well,
does this one evil thing that you practice or believe in, does that determine your entire being? Does that determine your entire alignment?
right. So, and that's
Well,
a good question. Because does that one act make this person rubber stamp D&D evil, or does the weight of all of their good works outweigh that? Now, obviously, I think we can all agree that like slavery is a universal evil thing, but
yeah.
let's talk about it at the at the individual level, you know.
Well, I mean, and that's where it can get really complicated. And hello, buddy. It also depends, it also can depend on your culture. And so there was an interesting article that I read the other day, and it was about this woman whose grandmother was from China. And you know, here in America, everyone's always saying, "Oh, you know, sweatshops are so awful. They pay these people pennies and they make them work 60-hour weeks." Oh. Which is very, very true. And that is awful. But then this person was writing this article about how the perception that the sweatshops are terrible is different over there from her personal perception. Because she talks about her grandmother, and yes, it's true, she was working 60-hour weeks and was working for pennies. But her grandmother liked working at the sweatshop better than what she previously had done, which she was previously a prostitute. Now, I mean, you know, so which one is worse? But this is also our perception here in the West, and that was something in this article she was talking about as well. You know, over there, it's not like you can just quit. You can't just quit and say, well, my boss isn't treating me right, so c'est la vie. But that's not how that works anymore. Or in some countries it's a little bit more complicated, and that's where you get a lot more of that gray area.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
He's got something to say.
He does. What does he have to say? Does he have an opinion on this? So,
Apparently.
do we think that that person is evil? That one person who does kindly acts, but because of how they were raised culturally, societal norms where they're at, dictate to them, slavery is just part of the deal. Are they?
Well,
I
I
guess.
mean, that's a complicated question because, you've got some of our founding fathers that we viewed as great people, great men who our country wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for these people. But they own slaves. So then the question is, are these people evil or are they just a product of their time, however sad that might be?
Yeah, and I guess that comes back to presentism, if you believe in that, which I do. But so I got a different one. Let's take it like that's a difficult question, and obviously we really want to hear from you guys out there in the real world land what you think. But
Yeah,
is
feel
that
free.
person evil? Is that like a is that like a lawful evil alignment, or are they more neutral, or are they actually good and just wrong on this one issue, right? Um, but let's take it to the D&D world. Do a twist, little
Oh, okay.
little twist. Um, so there's a village. It's being raided by goblins,
Okay.
and a whole bunch of the villagers are taken prisoner and hauled off to the goblins' underground lair to become slaves.
Okay.
Um, So the party swoops in and they learn from this raided village that a bunch of their people have been taken away. And so the party goes underground with righteous fury, swoops into the goblin village and starts butchering goblins. The goblins are fighting back. They manage to free all of the slaves. And during the melee and all the fighting, the party also kills all of the goblin non-combatants, women and children, those who aren't actually fighting, but they go through that village like a tornado.
Blaze it. All right. Got it. Torch to
Is
the
that
ground.
evil? Was that evil of them to do that?
Include the women and children in the goblin village in that carnage.
Yes.
I mean,
Does that make so? Let's twist it. Like I think, I think we both would agree that that piece is evil. Like to take it that far.
well, so that's where it gets complicated. Because let's say that your party goes through and it kills only the combatants, leaves the children and women alone. Well, okay, great. Free the villagers. Villagers go back to where they live. Who's to stop the women and children? Children are children, but they're not always going to be children. What happens when they grow up? And who's to stop the women from, seeking revenge on their husbands and brothers and sons? So that's where it gets complicated,
Ooh, it is
right?
complicated. More complicated than what I thought. Okay.
See?
So um are they when they swoop in there and they get carried away and they destroy everything, um they get kind of overtaken by the bloodlust, as they call it, or some call it.
Mhm.
Um, do you think, and now this kind of question goes out to the public, because I know that this is one that has come up in my games where the party will literally argue over how they should handle the non-combatant goblins.
Right.
Um, what is it that should have been done with those non-combatants?
You
If
know,
if if the party doesn't swoop in there and destroy everything, what is it that they should have done?
and that would be a bigger question. And I've had a very similar situation in one of my games where one of our players were killed by a person or by a villain. And we didn't kill the villain. We captured this villain so that this guy could take us to his boss and we could get to the root of the source. But this guy was not speaking. He was not going to give us any information. But we had captured him. So then we, as a party, we had the question, what do we do? Do we just keep him alive and hope he changes his mind? Do we maybe try and torture him and get some information out of him? What do we do? And that did draw quite a big fight in my party. A couple of people actually almost died over it because it was such a big conflict. We actually battled it out.
And I think that begs the question, like, if, and we mentioned this at the start, if the idea of what's good and evil is culturally defined, by culturally defined by fat guys in Lake Geneva 50 years ago, um, the then who is the ultimate arbiter of who is right, And I think you had a comic book reference to this, if I'm not mistaken. But I know that, if you were living in orc society, traditional D&D orc society, weakness might be perceived as an evil, or compassion even might be seen as an evil because they live on the fringes of civilization where life is hard and you've got to be tough, right?
Yeah, otherwise you're not going to survive. And thanks for reminding me of my reference because I was thinking about Thanos. Thanos, and I know a lot of you are going to have a lot to say about how, well, he had other options, but just play along with me for a minute. Was he really evil? Because what he was doing is he was trying to prevent what happened to his world to happen in other places. He was trying to prevent this type of grief and chaos that he had to endure. So in his mind, what he was doing was, for the greater good. But, that I like Thanos as a villain.
Might be considered a good guy in some sectors.
I think he was a good guy. I think the intention there should matter. And maybe that's it, Matt. Maybe we have to start looking at the intention. Like, is the intention to hurt everybody or, like your party? Are they torturing the women and children goblins or are they just getting rid of them quickly and swiftly? Or what do you do if you do let them live? Where do you put them? You can't, there's probably hundreds of them. You're not going to be able to just, and put them on a different planet somewhere.
It's a tough thing because if you haul them back to civilization and say, we're going to reform these goblins, and then you leave them in a town somewhere, they probably won't be there the next time you show up, one way or the other,
Because that's not the goblins' culture. That's just not who they are. That's not their character. And yeah, so you gotta think about that. But I think intention is really important when you're considering what's good and what's evil. The other thing that we had talked about was insanity. Like, what's the difference between insanity and then evil? Look at Joker and, Joker from Batman. I really like the one with Walking Phoenix. What a great movie. But in that movie, like, was he already evil? Or was he just driven to a level of insanity because of the world around him was not nice.
And that's like the difference between um the Dark Knight Joker, the Heath Ledger Joker, and the Joaquin Phoenix Joker was like night and day.
That's true.
Which I think is fascinating from a film standpoint, but that's not really what we're talking about. But yeah, insane, like things that drive someone to do evil acts because they are insane. Does that make the individual evil? Now, the act itself, we could argue that the act itself is still evil, even if the person is not.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult thing because like somebody like Ted Bundy was undoubtedly insane,
Yeah.
but he also, there was like an element to him that also like took a great deal of pleasure in the terrible things he did. So like, you know, there's that fine line. But if you could think of an example of where insanity and evil, while
Well, you know,
they
you talk
ride the
about
line together, but they're not the same thing, you
You
know.
talk about Ted Bundy. My personal favorite reference is the BTK killer. I mean, this is a guy who was a pillar in his community. He was a wonderful dad. He was a great husband. He was part of his church. He was part of his son's Boy Scout troop. I mean, he was doing all the wonderful, great things that, you know, you would think a good husband, father, pillar of the community would do. But then you turn around and he has this horrible dark side to him and he's doing unspeakable things. And no one would have known because he comes across like such a wonderful human.
Yes. But I think um this comes, it basically comes down to, I think we've kind of circled the drain, if you will, a little bit on why people want to tear alignment down, because alignment is just too strict. But I don't think that we have in the least bit destroyed my arguments from the last video, because like I said, it's a guide to to shape or remind you of how you intended to play this character. Because like I said, we always kind of play our characters the same way. And if we really want to get down to the role playing, we need little cues to keep us on path. But
That's true.
so
And it should just be a guide. It shouldn't be a hard and fast. I don't think it should be a hard and fastened rule. Just because you do one bad thing doesn't mean, oh, well, I guess I'm not lawful good anymore.
yeah, and I think a lawful good person is perfectly capable of doing bad things if stressed or circumstances dictate it, you know.
Sure. And maybe you
But
can play that into the character. They have this whole like character arc because they did this bad thing, but it doesn't make them a bad person anymore.
precisely.
Hmm.
So I want to throw one last thing out to the group, all of the eyes watching this. So I'm going to give the Dragon Slayer example, the movie Dragon Slayer. If you're a gamer and you haven't seen it, shame on you. Uh, but Um, so the village, and I think you had mentioned this, Dracoya, the village that sacrifices the virgins to a dragon each year to keep the village safe. Is the village evil? So that was basically part the one of the main themes of Dragon Slayer, the movie Dragon Slayer. So are they evil for having that lottery every I think growing season or whatever it was?
Hmm.
And I think I think it's an interesting conversation. Were they evil? Were they just terrified out of their wits? Get your Glenmorangie on. But with that, I'm going to let Dracoya take us home.
All right, guys, comment, like, subscribe. Yeah, we would love to hear your thoughts, but come back and have another round on us.
All right.